Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever stopped to think how something as everyday as your morning coffee connects to, well, a potentially felonious flower or even ancient sacred rituals?
It's a pretty wild connection when you look at it.
Right. So today we're doing a deep dive into humanity's really profound and honestly often surprising relationship with psychoactive plants.
Exactly. We've pulled together some fascinating sources for you. It's a mix of personal stories, scientific research, historical context.
A real blend. And our mission really is to dig out the most compelling insights, those, aha moments. We want to guide you through how these plants actually change our minds.
And how societies try, and let's be honest, often fail to control these changes. And maybe what it all tells us about some pretty deep human needs.
Okay, so let's start with something that seems almost universal, this human drive. It's kind of astonishing, right, that pretty much every culture, everywhere, has found some plant or fungus to alter consciousness.
Yeah, it's incredible for all sorts of reasons too. Pain relief, staying alert, being more social, even reaching for feelings of awe or ecstasy, mystical stuff.
It really does suggest that, as one source puts it, normal everyday consciousness is not enough for us humans.
It's a powerful idea. I mean, think about the sheer trial and error involved over millennia. Humans identifying these specific molecules in nature that let us, tweak our reality, intensify it, sometimes escape it.
It suggests there must be some benefit, right, if it's so widespread. Maybe relieving boredom, expanding your world if circumstances are limiting, or real medical uses like morphine for pain. Otherwise, wouldn't natural selection have just gotten rid of the drug takers?
You'd think so. The benefits must have outweighed the risks, historically speaking. But here's a twist. Our sources raise what's in it for the plants.
Ah, right. That's the really mind-bending part. How did plants evolve chemicals that just happen to fit perfectly into our brain receptors? It's uncanny.
It is. Take caffeine. We learned some plants put caffeine in their nectar. You'd think poison, right?
Yeah.
But no, it sharpens bee memory.
Makes them better pollinators, more faithful to that particular flower.
Exactly. A brilliant evolutionary trick for the plant. Which brings up that uncomfortable question.
Cui bono.
Who benefits?
Yeah. Could we humans be a bit like those bees? Kind of. Manipulated by plant chemistry to serve the plant's goals, maybe even against our own best interests sometimes.
Hmm. That definitely makes you think about how we label these things. An illicit drug is basically just what a government decides it is at a particular time.
Precisely. Look at coffee and tea, totally accepted. Valued, even, because they make us more efficient workers. Good for capitalism, right?
Clearly useful. But then you have psychedelics. Our sources point out, okay, they're generally no more toxic than caffeine, way less addictive.
But they got labeled a threat, a danger to social norms in the West, starting around the mid-60s.
And that arbitrary line, that's the bedrock of the drug war.
It is. And the origins, well, they're pretty controversial. One source mentions Richard Nixon's advisor, John Ehrlichman, flat out admitting years later in '94.
What did he say? He basically said the drug war was political. A tool to target enemies, the anti-war left, and black people. Not about health or safety. His words were something like, did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
Wow. That's blunt.
Yeah, and even after that admission, the war machine kept grinding. The Clinton administration, for example, spent record amounts on enforcement, even added federal death penalties for so-called drug kingpins.
Then post-2001, the focus shifted a bit, didn't it? The war on terror kind of took over as the reason for expanding government power.
It did. But after 50 years, a lot of people started realizing, hang on, the drugs are winning. All we really got were filled prisons disproportionately with black people, and drug use wasn't really going down.
But things are starting to change now, finally. It feels like maybe the end of this war now appears in sight.
It does seem that way. Look at the 2020 election. Oregon decriminalized all drugs and legalized psilocybin therapy. Washington, D.C. decriminalized entheogenic plants and fungi.
And by then, 36 states had already loosened up their marijuana laws?
Exactly. These are major shifts, real changes in policy, and probably public opinion, too.
Okay, so from that big picture policy, evolution, history, let's zoom right in to a very personal story. A garden, a beautiful flower that turned out to be, well, felonious. The poppy.
Right. The author talks about growing Papaver somniferum, the opium poppy, completely unknowingly at first. Beautiful flower, silky scarlet petals, and a black heart.
Sounds lovely. Until you find out.
Until you find out it's technically a felony to grow under state and federal law. And the sources highlight this weird ambiguity. Another gardener's might or might not be. It's confusing.
What sparked this whole discovery for the author?
A book, actually. Opium for the Masses by a guy named Jim Hogsher. He made these bold claims you could grow opium from legal seeds or get it from florist poppies.
Seriously. From, like, flower shop poppies.
Apparently.
Mm.
And he gave these simple recipes for poppy tea.
Mm.
Said it could relieve pain, anxiety, maybe give you euphoria, vivid dreams. It made opium extraction sound, well, the author says, like child's play. Totally debunked the idea there was some complex process.
But Hawkshaw himself didn't have an easy time of it, did he?
No, definitely not. He got arrested. SWAT team raided his apartment in Seattle, all based on a letter from an informant, apparently some disgruntled guest, who called him an addict running a drug lab.
And they seized what? Just dried poppies he'd bought?
Yeah, dried poppies from a florist. And this is where it gets kind of scary, legally. The sources mention this drugs exception to the Bill of Rights that the Supreme Court has upheld. It basically narrows your protections against illegal searches and stuff in drug cases.
So just making tea could put you in a really precarious spot legally. What did that mean for the author wanting to write about it?
It meant serious legal jeopardy. Lawyers literally warned them.
Yeah.
Publish this, and you could face charges for manufacturing narcotics, promoting drug abuse.
Just for writing about making tea from poppies in their garden.
Exactly. The lawyers basically said, look, a prosecutor could easily spin this narrative. You in your home, your garden, it looks bad. They could make making tea sound like manufacturing a schedule substance, even if the evidence for it being dangerous or having no medical use is shaky.
That's terrifying. The pressure not to publish must have been immense.
It sounds like it. But thankfully, the publisher at Harper's Magazine, Rick MacArthur, was apparently outraged at the idea of censoring the story. His commitment to press freedom meant it got published.
Good for him. So the author did get to share their own experience trying the tea.
I did. Just a one-time experiment. They described making it as feeling very normal, straightforward, so domestic. Like making pesto, they said.
But how did it taste?
Apparently truly awful. Really bitter, almost like raw opium. Caused some nausea too.
Wasn't some pleasant?
Any effects?
Yes. Within minutes, they said, little everyday aches and pains just vanished, dropped below the radar. And they felt weirdly energetic, even purposeful.
Purposeful how? Like sitting out on the front porch of one's consciousness, watching the world go by. But it also led to this compulsive need to be productive. Suddenly cleaning out a closet or weeding felt urgent.
That's odd. And there's a historical parallel drawn here, right? With prohibition.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Back then, apple trees were fine. Making cider could get you in trouble. Meanwhile, opium, totally legal, widely available.
Was even used by members of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the ones pushing alcohol prohibition.
In things called women's tonics, which often contain laudanum as opium. So yeah, the fortunes of the apple and the poppy were completely flipped back then.
It really hammers home how arbitrary these laws can be, what's legal, what's not. It changes.
It absolutely does. And the sources make this crucial point. While the government was busy with this, frankly, remote and ridiculous skirmish over people growing poppies in their gardens.
What was happening?
The real story was unfolding quietly. Legal opiates, like OxyContin, were being marketed by pharmaceutical companies and getting into millions of American bodies. That was a real crisis brewing.
And the author makes a stark point about the poppy tea.
Yeah. I doubt anyone has ever died of an overdose of illicit poppy tea. Puts the whole focus on garden poppies versus prescription opioids into pretty sharp relief.
Okay, let's switch gears to a plant most of us probably do interact with daily, maybe even right now.
Yeah.
Caffeine.
Yes. The great enabler.
The author tried giving it up, an experiment in abstention, and the results sound familiar.
Oh, yeah. Totally predictable withdrawal. Headache, feeling wiped out, lethargic, brain fog. Which, for a writer, they said, felt like an existential threat. Plus irritable, generally feeling down.
I think many of us can relate to that. It shows how deeply embedded it is.
It really does. And the source nails caffeine's trick. Daily, caffeine proposes itself as the optimal solution to the problem caffeine creates.
That's brilliant. It fixes the withdrawal it caused in the first place.
Exactly. You feel better because the withdrawal is stopping, but you think, the coffee's working. Which brings us back to the plant angle.
Right. Coffee and Camellia sinensis, tea, they somehow evolved a chemical that addicts, well, most of us.
Purely by chance, presumably. But what an incredibly successful adaptation for the plant. It makes you wonder again, are we being duped like those bees, serving the plant's evolutionary agenda?
Whether we're duped or not, there's no denying caffeine's impact, especially on Europe historically. its arrival apparently changed everything.
A new form of consciousness, the source calls it, sharpened minds previously fogged by alcohol.
Allowed people to break free from natural day-night rhythms, enabled new kinds of work, new kinds of thinking.
That's the argument. It wasn't just about waking people up. It was about fundamentally recalibrating the mind for the modern era. Think rational thought, focus.
Instead of alcohol-fueled, well, whatever came before.
Right. It became, you could say, the chemical architect of modernity. And this played out dramatically in the coffeehouse phenomenon.
Oh yeah, the penny universities.
Exactly. They weren't just cafes. They were a new kind of communications medium. For a penny, you got coffee and news, information.
And specific coffee houses became hubs for specific things.
Totally. Lloyd's Coffee House evolves into Lloyd's of London insurance market. Jonathan's Coffee House gives rise to the London Stock Exchange. The Grecian was linked to the Royal Society Newton and Halley debating physics over coffee.
Incredible. They were literally the crucibles of the scientific and financial revolution.
They really were. But not everyone was thrilled back then.
Ah, yes, the opposition. There was that women's petition against coffee in 1674, claiming it made men less vigorous.
Something like that. Robbed them of sexual energy was the claim. But the overall shift in the mental landscape was clear. Coffee fueled the Apollonian, the rational side.
As opposed to alcohol's Dionysian influence. There's that quote from the historian Michelet.
Yes. Coffee, the sober drink, mighty nourishment of the brain, heightens purity and lucidity, clears the clouds of the imagination, illumines the reality of things with a flash of truth. Beautifully put.
It really captures that sense of coffee as a tool for rational thought. What does modern science say about its effects? Does it actually make us smarter?
Well, it definitely improves performance on things like memory, focus, alertness, vigilance, learning. Studies show benefits for chess players, driving simulations.
Faster, but not necessarily smarter.
That seems to be the consensus. And often it's just restoring function in people who are already habituated, rather than providing a pure boost above baseline.
And what about creativity? Does it help there?
That's debatable. The science suggests caffeine is great for linear, focused thinking. But creativity might actually need the opposite, a loosening of focus, letting the mind wander. So caffeine might even hinder that kind of thinking.
Interesting. Still, the author, after giving it up, really missed it. Not just the effects, but the ritual. What work of genius has ever been composed on chamomile, they asked.
Fair point. The comfort, the sensory experience, it's deeply ingrained. But there's a shadow looming over our beloved coffee.
Climate change.
Yeah. The prospects look pretty dire. One estimate suggests half the world's coffee-growing land, especially in Latin America, might be unsuitable by 2050.
Wow. So capitalism, which benefited enormously from coffee, might face a real caffeine crash itself.
It's a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of it all.
Speaking of interconnectedness and maybe challenging our expectations, let's move from the everyday buzz of caffeine to something much older, more sacred perhaps, mescaline and peyote.
Okay. A different world entirely. Mescaline is described as maybe a fairly obscure entree in the psychedelic world compared to others.
And the experience is different, based on Aldous Huxley and the author's own account.
Very different, it seems. No ego dissolution like with psilocybin or LSD, no meeting strange entities, no real hallucinations in the common sense. It's more about an intense flood of sensory input and emotion, a tidal wave of awe.
And its history is incredibly deep, right?
Astonishingly deep. Peyote use in Texas goes back maybe 6,000 years. San Pedro cactus or Washuma in Peru, even older. These aren't recent discoveries, they're ancient technologies of consciousness. Deeply revered plants.
Which brings us to the Native American Church, the NAC.
Right. Officially formed in 1918, it became this pan-tribal religion, really a response to the existential crisis facing Native American cultures at the time.
And their ceremonies were different from, say, the ghost dance movement, less likely to provoke the authorities.
Exactly. They were described as sedate, sometimes with a Christian ambience, held privately, less threatening.
Can you describe the ceremony briefly?
It's typically an all-night ritual. Inside a teepee, around a fire, a special crescent-shaped altar. People consume peyote buttons, which are parts of the cactus. They sing, drum, offer prayers. It's very much a group healing process.
Focused on healing.
Yes. The attention of the group is fixed on the recipient of its prayers. And their view of peyote is crucial. It's not a drug.
How do they see it?
As sacred. A relative, an elder, as sentient. It's a teacher, a guide, a mirror that allows you to see inside yourself, to your core. Helps bring hidden trauma to the surface, often trauma linked to historical oppression.
There's that powerful line from an elder to an outsider: you always want to know everything, we just experience it.
Yeah. A profound statement about different ways of knowing, different relationships with these plants,
Hmm.
which leads to a really tricky situation.
The conflict between the NAC and the decriminalized nature movement. Decrim.
Exactly. It's described as an exquisitely awkward spot.
Yeah.
Decrim supporters generally respect indigenous cultures, of course, but the NAC got really worried
Worried about what specifically?
that decriminalization would massively increase demand for peyote,
Hmm.
that fresh hordes of psychonauts would descend on the already dwindling wild peyote habitats in Texas, potentially wiping it out.
And a specific decrim statement really caused friction.
Yes. The idea that peyote is Mother Nature's gift to all of humanity. The NEC view is different. They feel it does not belong to any one people, and calling it a gift to everyone felt like a slap in the face.
So the NAC wants to protect their medicine, its cultural context, not see it commercialized or over-harvested.
Precisely. It's about protecting something sacred, not just freeing up access to a substance, a real clash of perspectives.
While peyote is facing these pressures, what about the other mescaline cactus? San Pedro. Huachuma.
Ah, San Pedro. It's a different story in some ways. It's actually legal to grow in the U.S. It's common, even used as an ornamental plant. The author even had one in their garden for years without realizing.
Really? And it's a hardy plant.
Incredibly hardy.
Yeah.
Has an indomitable will to survive. Grows from cuttings, adapts easily, grows fast. Proponents say it knows the energy of the city, making it maybe the right medicine for this moment. They call it a gentle and heart-opening plant.
But preparing it is illegal, even though growing it isn't.
That's the strange part. Simply cooking it, slicing, peeling, simmering, to extract the mescaline that's technically manufacturing a schedulized substance, a federal crime.
Yet the author described the process as feeling mundane.
Yeah, pleasant, desultory, productive. More like cooking than committing a major felony. Highlights that disconnect between law and lived experience again.
The sources mention an indigenous teacher, Don Victor, a Chakaruna. What was his perspective on Huachuma?
He teaches that Huachuma doesn't heal in the Western sense. It helps raise our vibrational frequency, allowing our physical, mental, spiritual bodies to become pure light, illumination.
Not something you figure out intellectually.
Exactly. He stressed, you can't figure it out mentally. You need to feel it in your physical body.
And there's a connection made here between altering consciousness and healing trauma.
Yes, the desire to alter consciousness is seen as a human given, offering benefits like relief from boredom, expanding horizons, but also potentially healing trauma. Trauma defined as that feeling of helplessness against forces beyond our control, like being in an endless car ride with a drunk at the wheel.
And Huachuma's role.
To help reveal what is already there and engage you in healing yourself, the author describes a group ceremony.
Where the collective energy makes a difference.
Seems so. The pooled energies of other people, all of it trained on one person, one outcome. They describe one participant, Judith, confronting inherited pain, releasing it through a dramatic tobacco ceremony. It seemed to soften the grip of the rigid narratives we tell ourselves.
Creating space for a new story, and forgiveness was part of it.
Yes, allowing a new story might begin to take shape, and it involved 3 levels of forgiveness. Asking for it, offering it, and self-forgiveness. Powerful stuff.
How did that group experience compare to the author's experience with pure synthesized mescaline?
Quite different. With the pure mescaline sulfate, they felt this wave of revulsion for print, interestingly. An intense focus shifted to just seeing. It was incredible how much there was to see.
Just pure visual input.
Overwhelmingly so. Senses inundated. That tidal wave of awe again. It was long 12-hour social, led to appreciating music more, subtle perception shifts. It really shows how much context, setting, and even the form of the substance matters.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've covered a lot of ground. From the poppy in the garden, this sort of accidental felony.
Right, through the massive globe-spanning influence of caffeine, something we barely even think about as a drug.
To the ancient sacred cacti, peyote, and San Pedro, and the deep cultural and even political issues surrounding them.
Yeah, and woven through it all is this idea of how arbitrary our Western ideas about drugs and illicit substances can be. How they often obscure more than they reveal about these plants and maybe about ourselves.
We saw the drug war's political roots, its damaging legacy, but also signs that maybe, just maybe, that's starting to change.
Definitely signs of a shift.
So what's the takeaway here for you listening? Maybe consider how this framework we use drugs elicit might actually be limiting, how it stops us from seeing these plants as, well, profound tools from nature, maybe even teachers.
Right. What if we move beyond just their chemical names? What if we asked what they can teach us about consciousness, connection, healing, our own human needs?
Maybe the real wisdom isn't about controlling these plans, locking them down, or exploding them. Perhaps it's more about learning to respect them, maybe even just experience them with awareness and intention. Something to think about.